For those who are listening to this that have not experienced the Dixie Spirit, I hope that you can someday.
Oh, once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know.
Welcome to Not Forgotten, a weekly podcast sharing the stories of a place known as Utah's Dixie, and brought to you by the Doc Booth Foundation. Through stories as universal as they are personal, this podcast is dedicated to the memory of legendary family physician Dr. Craig Booth and to defining, preserving, and perpetuating the spirit of Dixie embodied in his life and work.
Hi, I'm Lyman, host of the Not Forgotten podcast. For more than 40 years, I've been writing and publishing with the intent of connecting landscape and story in the American Southwest. I believe the words spoken by a character in a story by Barry Lopez. Everything is held together by stories, he said. That is all that is holding us together, stories and compassion. Dr. Craig Booth was a man of stories and compassion. His personal story is one of the many that have made Utah's Dixie what it is, and his compassion is at the heart of that elusive entity we call the Dixie Spirit. The 2024 Lions Dixie Roundup Rodeo marks the 90th year of this near-mythic community celebration in Utah's Dixie. In today's episode, I want to take us back to 1934 and the founding of the rodeo and all its related community traditions, as well as the building of the Lions Dixie Sun Bowl in 1946, right after World War II. For decades, this mid-September celebration was the biggest event of the year in St. George, Utah. Everything about it exuded the Dixie spirit. And everything about it was near and dear to Dr. Craig Booth, who treasured his boyhood memories full of the pageantry and joy of those September days. I grew up a few blocks south of that venerable stadium known as the Sun Bowl. As a boy, it was for me what the Coliseum must have been for a Roman boy in ancient times, or what Fenway Park is to a Boston boy today. The Sun Bowl was this community's great autumnal gathering place. It seemed the whole town convened there on perfectly mild September nights for Dixie College and Dixie High School football games. In the days when Sark Arcelanian and Walt Brooks walked the Sun Bowl sidelines coaching the Rebels and the Flyers, I belonged to an army of boys 8 or 10 years old who roamed the walkway above the concrete seats, circling the stadium, lap after lap, dreaming of football glory. Come mid-September, though, on 3 successive magnificent nights, the Sun Bowl lights glared a little brighter and the buzz in the air was a little more intense as the rodeo announcer's voice echoed off the red bluffs and reverberated between the black ridges of St. George. The Lions Dixie Roundup was, and still is for me, the grand pinnacle of the Southern Utah year, a perennial symbol of all that is real and true and good about the Dixie spirit. The Sun Bowl was built by the St. George Lions Club just after World War II with the donated money and labor of everyday members of the community. It was there when I was born, a gift to my generation, and something we took for granted all the time we were growing up. Devout members of the Lions Club have nurtured and maintained it for 3 generations now. And though it is no longer the singular gathering place it once was, the Sun Bowl still stands as a reminder of the selflessness of the greatest generation. I played 1 year of JV football on the Sun Bowl's legendary turf before my gridiron dreams gave way to a passion for rodeo. That's when I began to appreciate the Sun Bowl for its original purpose as the home of the annual Lions Dixie Roundup. On rodeo nights, my cowboy buddies and I did not roam the walkways above the seats like we did at football games. Instead, we weaseled our way down to the arena floor and sat against the wall north of the bucking chutes among the rough stock riders. We were bright-eyed little groupies looking for a chance to shake hands or maybe even talk to some of our biggest heroes. One year, we stood on the back of the chute with Larry Mahan, and he let us help him set his bull rope on Swanee Kirby's humongous Scottish Highlander named Fuzzy 4. Mahan was the Babe Ruth of rodeo in those days, and that night he made an unbelievable ride on the tight-spinning, long-haired yellow bull. Afterwards, when he shook my hand and patted me on the back, I sank into a star-struck funk that lasted for days. One night in the early 1970s, the actor James Caan showed up at the Roundup. He'd taken up team roping, and St. George was one of the stops on a rodeo tour he'd embarked upon between movie roles. I sat next to him atop the equipment shed behind the Sun Bowl and asked him inane questions while he scouted the roping cattle and rated the barrier to determine how quick you had to get out of the box. The Godfather was fresh on everyone's mind at the time. The film had haunted me when I saw it the year before, and there I sat next to a fully resurrected Sonny Corleone, who had been shot to pieces in one of the most gruesome scenes in cinematic history. But the highlight of my behind-the-chutes forays at the Dixie Roundup occurred the night Chris Ledoux grew up in the bareback bronc riding. It was September of 1974. I was a college student by then, with my own dreams of going down the road as a bareback bronc rider. Chris Ledoux was not yet the world champion he would later become, nor was he the superstar recording artist he would even later become. But he was the up-and-comer everyone was talking about. He had drawn a bucking horse named Hancock, which happened to be the same horse I'd ridden in the Roundup the year before. I approached him behind the chutes and offered some information about his draw. He courteously listened and thanked me in his Mississippi, Texas drawl, then invited me to help him set his rigging. Hancock didn't fire near as well for Chris Ledoux that night as he did for me a year earlier. Chris finished out of the money, dusted himself off, gathered his gear into his bag, tossed it over the top of the cable of the Sun Bowl fence, climbed up and out of the stands, headed for the airport, flew to Pendleton or Albuquerque, and kept on going until he finally won the gold buckle in 1976. Several years ago, Chris Ledoux returned to the Sun Bowl, not as a bronc rider this time, but as a legendary country singer with 6 million albums sold. I was out of town that weekend and couldn't go. I wish I could have. It was one of his last shows. Not much later, he died of cancer at the age of 56. There is something mythic about this annual rite in St. George. It had always been this way, as far as we knew, and I suppose we assumed it always would be. Those of us awestruck youngsters who lined the fences didn't understand at the time that this autumn ceremony was brought to us courtesy of the Dixie Lions Club, and that the Lions Club was made up of a group of service-minded men who enjoyed getting together every Thursday night and who, in turn, gave countless hours of time and labor to make such an event a reality in our town. We did not realize that the rodeo, which had been held every fall since 1934, raised money for people in need, while it provided opportunity for the cowboys of our area to test their skills against the best hands in the land. And we certainly didn't have a clue that what happened every September at the Sun Bowl was a profoundly important thread in the fabric of our community's culture. All we knew was that it was rodeo time, the grand and glorious event we could always count on just a couple of long weeks after the hard medicine of going back to school. Perfectly situated in the center of town, the Sun Bowl is an island of memory amidst a sea of changing times, an arena of spectacle and flesh and blood reality in a world gone virtual. It is the place where generations of Southern Utahns have convened to experience larger-than-life events that add a mythic dimension to the everyday. Since it was completed by a corps of volunteers just after World War II, the Sun Bowl has stood as a symbol of community pride and a tangible example of the difficult-to-define Dixie spirit. It was built as the home of the Dixie Roundup Rodeo, but it was also the home field for Dixie High School and Dixie College football for several decades. Over the years, it hosted softball tournaments, dance festivals, music concerts, 4th of July celebrations, Easter egg hunts, and countless other events emblazoned on the memories of thousands of Southern Utahns. But more than anything, it was the rodeo grounds, the place where every September the community gathered on 3 nights to revel in the pageantry of rodeo and tried to hold on to something that seemed to be slowly slipping through their fingers. A lot of things have slipped through our fingers in recent years as the town has changed immeasurably, but one thing has not changed. Relic that it is, the Dixie Sun Bowl still stands in the city's center, and on 3 nights in the middle of September, you can still hear the roar of the cloud lift through the towering stadium lights into the perfect autumn darkness over St. George. Those erstwhile members of the Lions Club still meet every Thursday night to plan and prepare and make it happen. And the best rodeo cowboys in the world show up in St. George every year to give the locals a run for their money and provide a real-life thrill for the 6,000 or 8,000 who crowd into the Sun Bowl and sit on its hard concrete seats every night. 40 years ago, when I was working on a magazine article about the 50th anniversary of the Dixie Roundup, I had the privilege to interview Neil Lundberg. This was in 1984. Neil had been mayor of St. George in the 1970s, a decade earlier, but he shared with me, and I still have that interview on an old cassette tape. He shared with me how he and Ez MacArthur were riding their horse one day and up through, well, it was on a Sunday afternoon, and they came upon the mayor, who was also out for a Sunday afternoon ride, and that became the genesis for the Sun Bowl. And I wanted to share today just a little snip from that interview. It's not perfectly audible, but it's Mayor Neil Lundberg speaking 40 years ago, sharing how he and Ez MacArthur and Mayor Snow came together one day and they decided to build the Sun Bowl.
I was president the last part of 44 and first part of 45. Ez MacArthur and I we were out on our horses riding on Sunday afternoon, and we came back from southeast of town, and coming up through that area, and we overtook Eric Snow, who then was mayor at the time. Eric rode along with us, and when we got up in the vicinity of where the Sun Bowl is at now, Eric said, "Neil, why don't the Lions come to the city council and trade your lease for the ground up on the hill for the lease on this property down here where the present Sun Bowl is at?" He says, you've got part of your bowl already excavated here. You can go ahead and put your arena down here, and it would help the city an awful lot because it would clean this situation up, and he said that it'll be 30 or 40 years before the city will ever have enough money to develop that.
I feel so grateful and also just overjoyed to have the folks that I have here with me today to talk about the Sun Bowl and to talk about the Dixie Roundup. Dear friends, lifelong friends, Chad Drake, who is the current chair of the Dixie Roundup, and one of those erstwhile Lions Club members who have made all of this work, and who has brought his life's experience as a roper, as a rodeo guy, as a horseman, and as a businessman into the running of the Dixie Roundup on a volunteer basis. I also have Sharlene Squire Williams, who is not only a dear friend, but full disclosure, my cousin. And Sharlene was queen of the Dixie Roundup 50 years ago this month. Now, we can all do the math here, I'm sure, but anyway, she looks like she just graduated from Dixie High School.
She was 7 when she was queen.
And yeah, youngest queen ever. Sharlene grew up just literally down the street, down Flood Street from the Sun Bowl. And then her dream came true there as she came into that arena as queen that in 1974. And you also heard the voice of Doug Sorenson there just a moment ago. Doug is a legendary figure here in Dixie, and it's so great to have Doug here because not only has he roped with the best, he's beaten the best, but he's roped in the Dixie Roundup. He also, and some of my early memories of Doug, before I really even knew him, were of him playing football in the Sun Bowl. I remember him. He's a years old ahead of me in school, and I was one of those guys that was just in awe of our football teams. I tried to play a little bit on that field, but then got diverted into other things. But I remember Doug. I remember him getting the Spark Plug Award at Dixie High School. I think that was the most coveted athletic award that you could get at Dixie High School. And if I'm not mistaken, Doug, you were a linebacker? A middle linebacker. He was the one that shut down Cedar and all those other teams. And so Doug has a unique perspective because he roped with all the greats on that arena floor, just as Chad did, and maybe a generation later. But he also played football as an all-state football player and as a Dixie High hero. And so I want to talk to each of you about some of your personal memories of the Sun Bowl and of the Roundup and of other activities there. But Chad, let's start with you. Could you just share with us from the perspective of a Lions Club member and also as chair of the Rodeo, what all this means?
It's a lot of it's, you talk about heritage, tradition, the Dixie spirit. It's the Roundup itself is, I think, the longest tradition in St. George. And I think the only thing longer than the Dixie Roundup in the county is the county fair. So it's really cool. It's a neat event, and it's been going on since, when you think about it, since 1935, and it's been at the Sun Bowl since 1947. And I'm just grateful, just as a Lions member, just to carry on what they've done, what the past members have done, and try to, as you'd say, keep the train on the track and try to make it better. But yeah, it's been good. And I was looking, and I think there's been 46 chairmen before me that have taken over the reins of the rodeo. So it's a neat thing. Yeah, it is.
That's awesome. Do you feel, you already expressed this, that you feel like you're carrying on a tradition? Is there a lot of challenge and a lot to deal with to keep that tradition going?
Yeah, there is, but there's a good bunch of guys in the Lions Club. It's not just me, it's the Lions Club, and there's lots of moving parts, but it wouldn't go on without the guys in the club, the community, the sponsors. It's like a community event. It's a really fun thing to be involved in.
When you talk about the scope of it, how many people come every year?
To the rodeo? I'm just going to say it's usually, I've taught the ticket guys, we have the journal admission, so that some nights it's really hard to tell because some people don't sit. There's the walkway, and I'm going to say 5,000 a night. This is what we've normally.
So over 3 nights, 15,000 people.
It might be give or take.
And there'd probably be a lot more if there was room.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's.
You think about when that was built in 46, 47. At that time, it must have just seemed humongous. Like, how will we ever fill this? But it's certainly long past.
But ever since I can remember going to the rodeo there, it seems like when I was a little kid, it seems like it was always just filled. It was always to capacity, but yeah.
Share a little bit with us about roping there, participating there.
Yeah, I roped in there a few years when I was in high school and college, and it used to be on grass, and it was. And one night I remember the night that I think it was me and my brother that roped, and it started raining right before the team rope, and I was a little nervous because that grass gets slick, but it worked out, and it was fine. So it was fun, and you're roping against the guys you grew up with, your heroes or whatever, and yeah, it was a fun experience. And then a little more pressure because you're in front of the home crowd, and you don't want to fall off or anything, but yeah, it was good.
That's great. Chad, I want to come back to you, but I'm going to move on to Sharlene here. Sharlene, tell us about your love of horses and what it is that ultimately resulted in you riding into that Sun Bowl as Queen of the Dixie Roundup.
You hit the nail on the head when you said a lifelong dream. My dad was a lion in the Lions Club when we were younger, so we had a big part of going to the rodeo on those 3 nights and being in the parades and everything. But I would go and just be in awe of the girls that ran barrels and the queens and things. And I had a love for horses that my parents really hoped I'd grow out of, but I didn't. But it was just every young girl's dream was to be in the Dixie Roundup, be the rodeo queen. And I had aunts and cousins that were in before me. Sandra Staley and Jeannie Staley were both queens before me, and just to hear them talk about it and the fun and how good the Lions presidency and the Lions Club were to them and things. But when I tried out for princess for many years and just never did quite make it to be a princess, runner-up once, but not the princess, and I just thought this dream is never going to come true. But in 1974, when I tried out, then it did come true, and I was tickled pink, as my father would say. I could not take the smile off my face. I was elated, and I could hardly wait for September to come around so that I could ride and be the first one down in the arena to follow D.A. Swanee Kirby doing the serpentine ride. And then when they'd say my name and I could come in and just ride full blast around that arena and ride and hear the people cheer, it was the most precious moment to me. And the Sun Bowl's always had a place in my heart, but this ingrained it even more. And I'm just looking at this, the crown that we would get when we won Dixie Roundup Queen was passed down from each year, from one to the other. And Tweet Gardner was the one before me, and she passed this crown down. Now they get their own crowns and chaps and everything. We had a passed down crown. This was 50 years ago. And I had 3 homemade suits, cowgirl suits. We didn't have a whole lot of, like they do now, of changing in between everything. My suits were homemade by Jeannie Snow, and I was proud to wear them and proud to wear that same crown that so many queens before me had worn. And at the time when I see them getting all this stuff now, I go, oh, we got gypped. We didn't get gypped at all. We had one that was passed down, that it was what's the word I want?
Preserved.
It had been around the block a few
Prestigious.
times by many wonderful women had wore that same crown before me. So it meant a lot. And it was definitely the highlight of my life, something I still, 50 years later, can remember like it was yesterday. Loved every minute of it. Fulfilled my every dream.
That's awesome. I'm going to come back to you, Sharlene. But Doug, tell us about that Sun Bowl and your life there and some of the memories and things that stand out in your mind about that place.
It used to be, back in the days, there were some defining dates in St. George. New Year's Day, President's Day weekend, the Lions Queen contest in May, school getting out in May, the 4th of July in Gunlock, 24th in Enterprise, first week in August in Vail. Then you'd go to Labor Day. Then you came to the Lions-Dixie Roundup, and then the deer hunt, and then Thanksgiving and Christmas. And the Lions-Dixie Roundup was one of those prestigious events everyone looked forward to. And my first memory of the Sun Bowl was my dad, who I never really thought was very athletic. He played church softball there. With the way it was set up, you could have two games going at the same time, and there'd always be a short porch in right field. So all the old timers would try to hit it into right field so they could get an automatic double and not have to run. As I got older and started playing football, it was my dream come true to go to roam those sidelines. As a junior, I got to start on the defense, and as a senior, I got to play both ways, and it was just a privilege, not just for me, but for those people who you knew in the community. We'd play football on a Friday night, and then we had a milk run on Saturday. And as you'd go around to all the stores or the restaurants, hey, you remember that play here, and you remember this? Everybody went to the high school football game back then. And it was fantastic. Walt Brooks probably shaped or helped shape more lives in this community than anybody else. When he got to have 80 football players every year or whatever, it was great. The Sun Bowl was quite a home. You got to come down the cement steps. I don't know how we didn't trip and kill ourselves with those steel cleats and metal cleats. And then you'd run out onto the field, and Walt Brooks's teams would get in a big circle. Everybody get in a circle with the four captains out in the middle. You'd warm up, and then you'd play the game. I remember talking to Coach Brooks. We played against Cedar in our homecoming game our senior year, and it snowed. And Walt said that was one of the first times he'd ever played in snow in the Sun Bowl. For halftime, you'd usually go down by the goalposts in the end zones. We climbed up the stairs, snow-ridden and everything, and went over to the swimming pool and met in the area of the swimming pool for halftime. I got to play college football there for 1 year with Tom Ramage and Greg Croshaw. It's just memories that you'll never forget. You can still remember tackles that you made and places that you scored and so forth. I remember the Roundup. It used to be they had a meeting at the stoplight, the only stoplight we had in town. And there was a water tank there.
Kangaroo Court.
And they'd stop everybody. And if you wouldn't buy a ticket to the Roundup, they'd dunk you in the water tank. And they had their enforcer there, Tank Thompson. Nobody was going to not get in the water tank if Tank says you're going to get in it. So it was just memories like that. Then you had 3 days of parades, and the parade would go down the boulevard, which was at then Old Highway 91. So everybody that was coming over through Santa Clara, the diesels and all that, they would have to go to a different route to go through St. George. And you'd go down, and then you'd come back, and you hit Tabernacle and come back. And just memories like that of the Sun Bowl. As you said, Lyman, we got to rope there. Back in those days, the rodeo at the Roundup is a PRCA event. You had to be a member of the PRCA. unless you got to hometown it, which is what all of us team ropers used to do. And my one claim to fame in the Roundup was with my roping partner, Lynn Gardner. We won second. The only ones that beat us was Reg and Leo Camarillo. But those type of events is just things that us kids that grew up here, it was precious.
Let me just insert here, Doug, for those who don't realize Reg and Leo Camarillo, that would have been the equivalent of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
Exactly. But playing football there, it wasn't as nice as you have now, but it gave us a home field advantage.
I wondered about that, just the unique aspects of that as a football field with the tight sidelines and all. What was that like compared to playing on other fields?
Again, home field advantage. After the rodeo, it was a real home field advantage. But it was all, when you started in August and played there through September and October, it was as cool as an event as you could go. Not many places you'd go to would have fans you could set clear around the field. You'd have grandstands right in the middle, but not the Sun Bowl. And like you said, people would come into that Sun Bowl and walk around the whole games and stuff like that. So you didn't have much room on the sidelines, but there was room enough for 80 football players and the coaches to stand. It was, again, just a privilege to play there, go up there with it. One of the real events that I remember, I just graduated, and I graduated a year ago. And Walt Brooks was retiring 1 year or 2 years, I don't remember. But the year he retired, the community and the football players gave him a car from Bradshaw Ford. And it was a little slick out there, and a bunch of the football players and the people that congratulated him had to get behind and push him out the football field up to the on-ramp and get out. But again, it's childhood memories that you'll never forget.
The fact that it was a football field and the fact that there was a rodeo there right in the middle of the football season, it did create an interesting situation for the rest of the season on that field. How many games did it take to get it cleared? Or did it ever get completely?
The Lions did a great job with it.
Oh, I don't mean it that way. I just mean that it's almost impossible to.
It is, and that's what I say. It was a home field advantage because most of us knew we had to expect it.
Oh, that's great. Chad, back to the Lions again. The rodeo is this wonderful event, and for those of us who've lived here all our lives, it's a pinnacle of the year that Doug described. At least for me, it was. Deer hunt was right up there with it, but the Roundup was just really the pinnacle of the year. But it wasn't just to have a rodeo and to have a good time. It was to do something good for the community. Could you talk about what the rodeo does, charity-wise and in other ways?
Yeah, like I said, the proceeds go back to the community. And if someone needs Lions Club, we're here to serve. And if we've given to several organizations over the years, and one of them is on Friday night on Pink Night. A certain part of the proceeds go to the cancer clinic here at St. George, and we do that every year. So yes, we're a nonprofit organization, and like I said, the proceeds go back to the community.
What are some of the memories that just stand out most for you, Chad, in that arena?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like you were saying, when I was a little kid growing up, I remember the high school games are on Friday night and the college games are on Saturday night. Normally, if there wasn't one on Friday night, there's one on Saturday night because if one of them was away, the other one played at home. That was fun, going down and just walking around. And the games are always fun there. I played Little League football there. Of course, I don't go back. When I was there, the schools started having their own fields when I got into high school, and the games weren't there anymore. But it was fun, and then we used to scout-a-ramas there, scout functions there, and then there was 4-H horse shows that we went to there that were fun. And then here, just when my daughter was a senior back in 2017, they had Sadie Hawkins there, so it was fun. But yeah, there's the Sun Bowl is something that's always been there, and it's like something that it's right in the middle of town, and it seems like if you have something there, it draws a crowd. It's a really cool place.
The Sun Bowl is this gem in our community. It's right in the middle of town. It's something that if we lost it, it could never be recreated. Just like all the other things that we've lost in our community, we can't bring them back. We can only bring back we can only maintain that spirit and that community spirit, that Dixie spirit. But I guess I just feel very grateful that the Sun Bowl is still there and that the Lions Club is committed to it, that you're working with the city to improve it and to keep it into the future.
Yes, and there are plans to restructure it and do some renovations down there. And I think it's a good thing. I think it'll be more it's something that needs to be done, and hopefully it will save it's lasted for 90 years, and hopefully this next thing will last for another 90 years and serve the community. The Sun Bowl has really served the community over the years, and it's the community that supports it that's why it's there.
And that's the thing, that the Sun Bowl wasn't built by some tax initiative, or it was built because people got together and said, let's do this. And they donated money, they donated labor. The Lions Club brought it all together. And it seems to me like, now we answer every problem with more public money and more public money. And that's wonderful. But at the same time, the Sun Bowl is something that people are still willing to volunteer, give their time. Yeah. The Lions Club is still engaged there.
Yeah, we do volunteer and help out where we can to make it usable and keep things up to snuff down there, yes. And the city helps us, yeah.
I always wished that my dad was a Lion, because my best friend across the street, John MacArthur, his dad was the secretary of the Lions Club, and he got free tickets to the rodeo every year, all 3 nights. When I was 5 or 6 or 7 years old, I only got to go one night. But John got to go every night because his dad was a Lion. But these are precious things in a community, and to still have them and to still be able to embrace what they mean is really special. Sharlene, my goodness, you've had all these decades to think about all this. What are some of you've already shared a lot of those highlights, but what are some of your thoughts about that place and that event?
The Sun Bowl itself is unique. It is a part of St. George. It is a part of Dixie. It's something that, as a child and growing up, we always love to go to, no matter what. Church ball and the football and the 4th of July fireworks out of there. The place would be crammed full of people to watch the 4th of July fireworks from there. But going to the Roundup, the hot dogs always tasted better at the Roundup. The peanuts were better at the Roundup. The root beer was better at the Roundup.
They still are.
And it's like, you're outdoors, the smell of the horses and the cows make everything taste better? Is that a good thing to say?
Someone asked me that once, how come the hot dogs taste so much better there? And the only way I could explain it is it's like sitting in the left field bleachers at Wrigley. Everything just tastes better.
Yeah. But it's the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's just been, everything was better at the Sun Bowl. And Mo was talking to me this morning and reminded me, he says, you remember you could rent pillows to sit on when you'd go to the rodeos, and afterwards we'd throw all those pillows out to the arena. And so it was fun. The kids I know still run out there and play after the rodeos, but we'd go out and throw all the pillows out and then throw them around. And
we needed those pillows because that's another unique aspect. Those are concrete seats. And I'm just going to insert here because my father-in-law, LeGrand Fry, he flew in bombers in the South Pacific in World War II. And as soon as he got home, he learned how to do gunite with concrete. And all those old pictures of them gun-iting those hard seats in the Sun Bowl, There he is, LeGrand Fry, fresh home from World War II, building those hard seats that we've sat on for how many decades now?
But they're still standing, and that's the good part. We would, as the pep club, would go to all of the football games and things and sit on those hard seats and get up and cheer for our football fans. And when Doug and I were in high school, the dress code was dresses. You didn't wear pants. You didn't wear pants to the sports things. You didn't do anything. The girls were in dresses until I was a senior. I think it changed finally. So we would go sit on those hard things in our dresses.
So, Doug, remember that, was it 68 that the National Intercollegiate Rodeo Finals were held in St. George?
I don't remember the year, but I think it is.
The hottest week of the year.
Yep.
It was sometime right in the middle of the summer, and the National Intercollegiate Rodeo Finals were held in St. George at the Sun Bowl. We were younger there, wide-eyed at all these great Phil Line, A.C. Ecker, Sandra Kurlock. But what I remember most about those days during that rodeo was that you could not sit down on that cement. It would literally burn your bottom with whatever degree burns you might get. And I remember in the concession stands, they were renting little Formica boards with bags of ice so that you could sit down put a bag of ice in a Formica board and sit down on it to watch the rodeo. Anyway, Doug, take it from there, will you?
Back in the day, they didn't have reserved seating. And you'd have some people get to the rodeo before the parade would start. So you'd be there at 4:30, 5 o'clock to get your seat. Put your blanket down, put your chairs down or whatever. Then they went to reserved seating, which was the best thing they ever did. And right around the 1st of August, which is 6 weeks before the rodeo, people would go over to the VFW and start camping out to buy those chair seats, buy the seats they want. And they didn't go on sale till the week before the Roundup. So they were there sleeping, staying overnight for 5 weeks or 6 weeks to get their seats.
And your mom was one of them.
She was.
You'd have thought it was a Rolling Stones concert or something like that. Huh?
And it just continued. At first, it was just a few. And pretty soon people found out about it, and then it got to be quite a lineup. And now they do the national finals do. As long as you buy those tickets every year, you get to keep them. So that's a plus.
And Chad, we did another milestone this year. You could buy reserve tickets online here for the first time.
Actually, the reserve seating was always the Saturday before. And like Doug said, it used to be they didn't have reserve seating, so it was just every year it was just a clean slate, so whoever got there first could get them. And now they have reserve seating, and then if you buy those seats, then you have the opportunity to get them the next year. And if you don't, they go back to the public. But this year, with what reserve seating we had left, we went online with it, and it went really well.
Good.
And then we will still sell general admission like we've always done, like the Saturday before.
So the Dixie Roundup's gone digital then.
Yes.
It's gone from Formica seats with ice under them to digital.
Yeah.
And one thing that I can always remember is that Lions Club was made up of some true men. And I look back to Skinny MacArthur being in the ticket booth, Phil Squires being in the ticket booth, Afton Ents being in the ticket booth, other guys doing other things to make that rodeo work. It was people that didn't give a hoot about rodeo, but cared about the Lions Club and the good that it did for the community. They volunteered their service, and there was people riding horses in the parade that I guarantee you didn't get on a horse until the next parade.
I appreciate so much the chance to spend a few minutes with each of you. This is so awesome to be able to reminisce. There's something about that Dixie spirit that when you start sharing and remembering stories, it just shines. And I think it's been shining in this studio here today. Chad, I know we've talked about a lot of things, but we're obviously, this podcast is dedicated to the memory of Doc Booth, Craig Booth. And I know that you knew him, and I know that you knew his connection to the rodeo as well.
Yeah, one year after the rodeo, for our special act, we did motorcycle jumps. And it took a little bit to set the stage up, but it was really cool. It was really neat, and everyone stayed. But while they're setting the ramps and everything up and everyone's getting ready, a bunch of the kids that were doing the jumps around their motorcycles riding around. Then pretty soon, here come Craig on his Harley, and he's just going around slowly around the arena. And he gets up the announcer stand, and he got his attention, and he started telling a joke. He told the announcer, he was telling this joke to the announcer about on somebody, and it was funny. But yeah, only him would do that.
He just on his own. He rode his Harley into the arena in front of 5,000 people.
And maybe he had some connection with someone, but I was just like, yeah, there he goes. It was, yeah.
Oh, that's great, Doug. I know you knew Doc Booth well and interacted with him, and we know that his stories are legendary that we can't even hardly begin to break the surface on here. But I know that he loved the Roundup. And
yeah, Craig is a great man and has done so much good for this community. A tradition that Craig had that I'll always remember is on Friday and Saturday of the rodeo. It was about, 2/3 the way through. He would come up, and we've got some chair seats that we've had for a long time, and he'd come up and would sit down by me and Lee Snow and just talk. He'd been there on his Harley. He was in shorts, and it was just something that we looked forward to. And I'd lean over to Lee, and he'd lean over to me. How long before you think Craig will be here? And it was just those types of traditions that you remember about the Roundup. One of the ones that us that were there will never forget, for whatever reason, was the chariot races with Jay and Dean Terry, and I don't know who the other one was, but they had these chariot races to go around the arena in the traditional attire, and it got pretty wild there for a while, but that's just something you can always remember.
It seems like those tunics they were wearing didn't stay closed.
That was a very polite way of putting it. Yeah, it was a show.
In more ways than one.
And part of the tradition about the Roundup is it's not just between the opening event and the closing event. It's the 30 or 45 minutes before the rodeo when you're sitting there and just visiting with friends. And some people you don't even know. 30 to 35 minutes after the rodeo, well, the crowd thins out. You sit there and you visit. And those are the traditions that people just, they don't take time to do anymore, just to sit and visit.
And sometimes it's people that you always just see them there at the rodeo.
That's a really good point, Chad. There's certain people that I only see once a year, and it's at the Roundup. Sharlene, bring us home, will you?
Bring you home? I would just like to say Craig Booth was one in a million. When you say he comes in shorts, it didn't matter to Craig what he was going to, or if he was on his motorcycle or in his little sports car, whatever he was dressed in, sweatpants, shorts, whatever, he would go. And he was comfortable in that, and everybody loved him, and everybody wanted to say, hi, Craig, and he knew you, and you knew him, and it was just always fun to see him around town and doing Craig Booth things. Great man. And the Sun Bowl and Dixie has got a place in my heart. My grandchildren are now going to the rodeos with us each night, at least one night a week, and wanting to do the mutton busting and the pre-grand entry show that they do that brings tears to my eyes, brings tears to their little eyes, and they just think it's the most wonderful thing they've ever seen. When they honor the military and the armory and our first responders is what we say, and things just brings the community together. There's no place like it. There's nothing like it to gather us.
You shared that so beautifully. That brings us home. However, I have another thought, too, and that is when you said Craig Booth things. That Craig Booth thing for me was, and I talked about it in the first podcast in this series, was when he read an article that I'd written about the bulls are here, how we as kids in this neighborhood in the south end of town, when Swanee Kirby would show up, or Cotton Rosser, even it was back that far, Cotton Rosser showed up with his big trucks and those bulls were unloaded, the word would go out through the neighborhood, the kids on their bikes, and within minutes, we would all be gathered there around the stock pens looking at the bulls. And Craig Booth read that story many years ago. And then several years ago, he started one year. It was probably about Wednesday of rodeo week, maybe Tuesday. I got a text in all caps, and it said, "The bulls are here." And I didn't even know who it was from. He had my number. And anyway, so I responded, and I said, "Awesome, great." And then I finally figured out it was Craig Booth. But we ended up meeting the next morning before we both went to our various responsibilities. We went early in the morning, and we met at the stock pens, and we looked at the bulls. We reminisced about our own boyhood memories of the Roundup. And then we went to Denny's for breakfast. And we did that for at least 3 years, maybe more, successively, and that was a Craig Booth thing. We didn't really know each other that well. I obviously knew who he was. I didn't know, we had never really interacted that much. But he sent me a text that said, "The bulls are here." It was all tied to the Dixie Roundup and to the common memories that we had. And I just think, what an example of that Dixie spirit, how that feeling of we belong to a place, we belong to a community, we belong to a family of people that developed this place into what it is. And now we're sharing it with the whole world who is coming here. And I'm hoping that, as Chad said, that you visit with people, and some of them, or maybe Doug, you said it too, after the rodeo that you don't even know, and maybe they're capturing some of that Dixie spirit because of this event. I know that my grandkids, for them, the imagery and the pageantry and the excitement of the rodeo is really meaningful for them. And to the point that my grandson last year got drawn up for the mutton busting, and he rode his sheep all the way to the other end of the arena. And I think that's probably the pinnacle of Sam's life to this point, isn't it? And he's had a lot of great adventures in his life, but all of those things just combined together. None of that would be possible without the spirit that we've been talking about today.
For those who are listening to this that have not experienced the Dixie spirit, I hope that you can someday, because it's something that is precious to us, something we relive and love about it. But I hope someday, if you haven't, that you can feel and be touched by that Dixie spirit.
Thanks, Doug. Let's bring that home right there. Thank you. Thanks to each of you.
The Doc Booth Foundation is dedicated to empowering individuals through educational opportunities and promoting mental health advocacy. Through scholarships and funding for important community needs, the foundation perpetuates the can-do spirit of the founders of this community, using the lessons of the past to chart the course for a better future. Not Forgotten is produced by Ricky Valadez and made possible by the generous support of St. George Area Zag Stores, industry-leading tech support and accessories. Lyman Hafen's books can be found at lymanhafen.com.
Once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. We came sent me. I'm sure I do not know. The hot winds whirl around me and take away my breath. I've had the chills and fever till I'm nearly shook to death. All earthly tribulations are but a moment here. And oh, if I prove faithful, a righteous crown I'll wear. We came to Dixie, and we called it home. Oh, in Dixie, we've lived and grown. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. I hope that there's a heaven with rivers pure and clean, but I know that